Tune in to the frequency of your own life. Tune in to the frequency of your own life. Hello, welcome to The Journey. My name is Aurora. I'm so glad that you're joining me again today. We are still on our quitting journey. I hope you've been enjoying quitting as much as I have. Maybe you were waiting on permission to be able to quit some things and you found that. Well, congratulations to you. And we are not done yet. We have covered the first 4, and today it is my goal in this video to cover the last 4. So we're not going to waste any time. We are still talking about the book, The Emotionally Healthy Woman by Geri Scazzero. And I like to say it's for the emotionally healthy man or woman because everybody could use a little bit more emotional health in their lives. So today we're going to start with I quit number 5, which is quit blaming. Well, we've all found ourselves in situations where we are blaming others for our current condition, whether it's our state of mind, our happiness, our finances, our productivity at work. It is very easy to do. But when we're blaming others, a lot of time it is a reflection of the fact that we really have not taken responsibility for our own lives, at least in that particular area. And so she helps us to identify areas of our lives where we're blaming others and even realizing why we find the need to blame others and how to reclaim that power and put it back on our own page. She says here in this chapter, in a similar way, as human persons created in God's image, we are born with certain rights and responsibilities that enable us to walk in God-given personal freedom. God-given personal freedom. We don't need, for example, to find someone else to give us permission to make choices, although sometimes we're waiting on that. We don't need to wait on someone else to give us permission to make choices, set boundaries, declare preferences, think for ourselves, or feel. These abilities are already ours. However, like the characters in Oz, we have to take responsibility for what we've been given and put those things to use. This includes freedom to take responsibility for choosing our own lives. So sometimes we don't realize that this is a God-given, not just a right, but it's a responsibility. And how do we know that? Besides just all the other references we can point to, it's just the fact that when we leave this world, we will stand before God for ourselves. And there won't be any finger pointing, any blaming, whether it was a parent, a leader, a boss, a mentor, it doesn't matter. We are responsible for the lives that we have been given, which means that we have the privilege and responsibility for the condition, the situation of our own lives. So in order to overcome this, we'll call it a negative habit of blaming, we have to be willing to take that responsibility. And honestly, sometimes it can seem a little bit easier to give that responsibility over to others because if things don't go well, they don't go right, we will definitely have someone to blame. But if we're making decisions for ourselves, then we actually have to come to a conclusion and kind of sort out why we did what we did, take responsibility, and find a new way to move forward rather than sitting back and pointing a finger and saying it was all someone else's fault. You know, something that God told me a while back was stay in your place of power. Stay in your place of power. And I didn't fully understand it then, and I'm sure I don't fully understand it now, but I've come more to realize that it's along these lines of what she's talking about. Realizing what is on your page, realizing what you have power and responsibility over. That is your place of power, and it keeps us out of that victim mentality and that victim posture, waiting for someone else to come along and rescue us from our own lives. No, God has given us that freedom. God has given us that responsibility. And if we find ourselves blaming others, we can simply step back and say, oh, wait, I actually have power to change this situation. God gave it to me. Nobody can take it away. And it's my right and my responsibility. And I'm going to do something healthy and productive with it. So we can take that finger, turn it right back around, not in an accusatory way, but in a way to say, stay in your place of power and stop blaming others for our own lives and our own condition. When we do that, we'll find that we're living more fully and more abundantly and more free lives. So who doesn't want that? I know I do. So Number 5, we said we're going to quit blaming. And then we're going to move on. And she goes into so much detail. Like I said, my goal is to cover all 4 of these in this one video. So I'm going at a very high level. You can go get that book and see what she's talking about more specifically, because she really will help to walk through those steps and to journey you through to that other side of freedom. So then she has, I quit number 6, which is quit over functioning. How many of us have been guilty of that? Now, she says in this book, this is how she describes it. She says, let me repeat, overfunctioning is doing for others what they can and should do for themselves. Overfunctioning is more than simply a bad habit. It is a weed whose deep roots can often be traced back through generations in your family of origin. And the thorny branches of that weed reach far out into our workplaces, parenting, marriages, churches, and friendships. And she goes on to say that overfunctioning is not just a one side or the other, but there's a continuum. And oftentimes we find ourselves on one end or the other of that continuum. But again, she helps us to identify maybe signs that we are overfunctioning. Not going to go into all that, but one thing I will say is, are you worn out? Are you feeling a little resentful, maybe? Feeling a little bit bitter, feeling kind of out of tune with your own life and with what's going on with you? You may be overfunctioning, and that means doing for someone else what they can and should do for themselves. So she walks us through identifying that and even helps us through the journey of relinquishing those responsibilities. Because as we've talked about before, I believe it was, is no a bad word. When we make those decisions that put healthy parameters around our own lives, it affects others in a way to where they respond and they react. And we do need to be prepared for that. So if we find that we're overfunctioning and we start to make decisions so that we can get back on our own page and allow others to do for themselves what they can and should do for themselves, it will come with the reaction. And she helps with her own testimonies, which I find are funny, informative, enlightening, and like I said, pretty transparent. So it's encouraging to know that you can go through and come out on the other side in victory. Now, she does talk about the 5 deadly consequences of overfunctioning. And number 1, she says, it breeds resentment, like we just mentioned. It perpetuates immaturity, because if I'm doing someone else's job, they never actually have to grow up and do it themselves or grow into a place where they're able to do it themselves. Number 3, it prevents us from focusing on our life's calling because we're too busy taking care of somebody else's. And number 4, it erodes our spiritual life. Number 5, it destroys community. Okay, she goes into all the details of that. So quit overfunctioning. So we're going to move on to I quit number. Oh wait, no, I can't move on to that yet, because I knew I was missing something. She gives a good guideline here, and I'll read this as the end of the chapter. Still talking about quit overfunctioning. She says, choose one area of your life where you are overfunctioning, doing for someone else what they can and should do for themselves. It could be work, marriage, friendship, parenting, church, or school. Take a few minutes to review the 4 phases. Now, these are the 4 phases that she sets forth in the book. Number 1, admit that you're overfunctioning. No shame, no guilt, no condemnation, just what it is. Number 2, unleash the earthquake. Won't get into that. Number 3, prepare for chaos. That doesn't sound fun, right? But number 4, stand firm. And then she goes on to say, what might be a practical next step for you today? Offer this to God, asking the Holy Spirit for counsel and courage. Consider talking with a trusted mentor or mature friend, then step forward into what God reveals to you. Oh me, oh my. Yes, goes back to staying in our place of power. If I'm overfunctioning, that means I'm making decisions that are damaging me and that are impairing those around me from moving into their fullness of their function and their own ability, because I'm on their page. Okay, so number 7, quit faulty thinking. Okay, she says faulty thinking is when we believe something to be true that is false. As Mark Twain once said, it isn't what you don't know that hurts you, it's what you know that isn't so. It isn't what you don't know that hurts you, It's what you know that isn't so. In other words, when we believe a lie, when we believe something that is not true. And she goes on to say, faulty thinking is a deadly threat to emotional and spiritual health. It can mire you in powerlessness, paralyze you in hopelessness, fill you with false guilt, cut you off from joyful living, obscure your hopes for the future, and the list goes on. We won't read all of those. Then she talks about 3 types of faulty thinking. And I hope that as we're talking here that the Holy Spirit is bringing up some of those things to you that he's been dealing with you about ways of thinking that are not true, that are not accurate, but yet have been programmed deeply within us. So one of the types of faulty thinking that she mentions is all or nothing thinking. Number 2 is taking things personally. Number 3, thinking things will never change. And I can say that these things are very destructive. And we probably all have areas of life where these 3 elements are present in the system and the way that we think things through and process. For one, all or nothing thinking. So, and maybe we go out for dinner at a restaurant and the food was great and the atmosphere was great, but the waitress kind of had an attitude. I know that never happens, but let's just pretend that it did. And that attitude of the waitress just kind of puts a dark cloud over the whole evening. So rather than thinking about how the food was good, the environment was nice, you had a lovely time with your friends and family, all we can think about then is the nasty attitude of that waiter, of that waitress, and it kind of makes the whole experience a bad one. So when we retell it, we can't retell it without putting the focus on the bad waitress. That's just an example of all or nothing. Like if anything was bad, all of it was bad, okay? And number 2, taking things personally. I think we can all figure that out. Number 3, thinking things will never change. And I have to say, this is one of the most dangerous, destructive ways of thinking, because when we start to think that things will never change, it breeds a sense of hopelessness. And hopelessness leads to despair and depression. And those can be some very strong traps because it was, and I know that there's different elements, there's and I'm not trying to put parameters around all of that, but one aspect of it is the way that we have framed up our thinking, the way that we view the world and our situations. And if we view them as though they will never change, it can really cement us in a place of hopelessness and despair. So it is worth exploring and asking, God, are there areas where I feel like things will never change? More than likely, if it's been like that for a long time, it's probably like a dead or dormant place in our heart or in our life, but it's locked up on the inside of us. So I'm asking God to just awaken that in us and let us see that things can and will change. One thing that he told me several years ago was trust me to birth something new. I was talking to him about something that just seemed like it was the same old thing over and over and over. And he said, trust me to birth something new. And that gave such hope and excitement in me, because even when I looked at the situation and there was no evidence that anything was changing, that word he gave to me would jump up on the inside with some light and some hope. And I would say out of my mouth, God, I trust you to birth something new. So even you might say, well, he didn't tell me that. Well, you can borrow that from me until you get your own word. But borrow that and say, God, I trust you to birth something new. Even if it's just a faith statement and you're letting him know that you're aware that all things are possible with him, that nothing is impossible, even for those of us that believe. So we are trusting him. Even when it looks dark and it looks hopeless, we have a glimmer of hope to say, I trust you, God, to birth something new. So that's one way we can break that system of thinking that things will not change. We don't want to get trapped in that cycle of hopelessness and depression. That's not God's best for us. Now, moving on. We're doing so good. Look at us. Number 8, quit living someone else's life. Quit living someone else's life. She says, whose life are you living? Toward the end of his life, Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw was asked what person in history he would most like to have been. He responded by saying he would most like to have been the George Bernard Shaw he might have become, but never did. How about you? Whose life are you living? Your own or someone else's? The following are a few signs to help you discern if you're living someone else's life. She says, you care too much what others think of you. You lie. We talked about that before, not being honest about how we think and feel. You blame. You avoid confrontation. You believe false peace is better than no peace. You always put others before yourself. You say yes, even when you don't want to. You can't disagree with strong people. You're more concerned with keeping people happy at the expense of your own happiness, and you are unsure of your preferences. She says these are some ways that you can realize maybe that you're not living your life, but you're actually living out someone else's life. Then she goes on to say that God calls us to get off the bus that other people are driving. Jesus did, and he wants us to do the same. You know, one thing that God told me several years ago was tune in to the frequency of your own life. Tune in to the frequency of your own life. That's what he was telling me. He was telling me, Aurora, get on your page. I have put things in you. I have destiny in you. I have purpose in you. I have planned for you. But you've got to hone in and you've got to tune in. You've got to quit some things. You've got to come out of some faulty thinking, quit blaming, quit living someone else's life. Hone in, tune into the frequency of your own life. And it's only when we do that that God's divine image through us uniquely and individually can be expressed in the earth. But it takes boldness and it takes courage, because oftentimes our society frames up a life for us. And if we never shed it off as we mature and grow, we will continue in that pattern until we leave this world. But I'm going to say on my behalf, and hopefully on yours as well, that's not going to be the case for us. We're going to tune in to the frequency of our own lives and allow God to lead us, to guide us and direct us, and allow the passion and the desires and the gifting that he has put on the inside of us to come forward and open up doors and create a life that he has in mind for us to live. We're in partnership with him. We are working together with him, and he is leading and guiding us. And sometimes it is into a scary place where we have to quit and let go of some things. And we don't always know what's on the other side of that quit, but we move forward believing that God's best for us is on the other side of letting go of things that are no longer productive, no longer bringing forth the life of God for us and for those around us. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I really hope you have received from this journey of the 8 I quits. If you have, there's something you quit or you're thinking about quitting, drop it below in the comments. Let's be community together. Maybe you haven't even started the quit, but you just know, yeah, that's something that I'm thinking about and I need to quit doing that. Maybe you missed some of the previous videos. You can go back and watch those as well. We'll post them here or here. But either way, thank you so much for joining me today. God bless you, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.